Let's talk boundaries, the guilt, the pushback, the manipulation. That's what makes boundaries feel hard. Not the boundary itself, but what happens after. The moment somebody acts all hurt and the moment they get all defensive and the moment they try and talk you out of it, and suddenly you're second guessing, wondering if you were too harsh or too selfish or too much, God forbid. But let's get one thing straight. You are not responsible for how somebody else reacts to your boundary. It's as simple as that. A boundary isn't a negotiation, it's not an invitation for debate. It's a statement of self respect. And today you're going to learn how to hold them without caving into guilt, without over explaining, without carrying the weight of the world and other people's discomfort on your shoulders. Because you don't have to apologize for protecting your peace. Let's start with talking about the trap of people pleasing, because I used to be a people pleaser on autopilot. I'd say yes when I meant no, or shrink my needs just to make other people comfortable. And for a while, I convinced myself that I was just being kind, I was keeping the peace, and it was easier that way. Until one day I caught myself in this pattern. I couldn't ignore it. A friend asked me for a favor, something that I really didn't have the time nor the energy for. And instead of saying no, I was like, oh, yeah, okay, well, I'll try. I could feel it in my gut. I just didn't want to do it. But I said yes anyway. And guess what? They took that as a full yes. So now I was frustrated and resentful and stressed, not at them, but at myself. Because every time I caved, I wasn't just letting somebody else push my limits. I was teaching myself that my needs didn't matter. And that was the real problem. And it's kind of obvious, but the reason this matters, and let's be real for a sec, when somebody pushes back on your boundary, what they're really saying is, I preferred it when you put me first. And that's where it gets tricky. It gets a bit dicey because if you don't hold that line, here's what happens. You start questioning your own needs. You start teaching people that your limits are optional and you allow guilt to override self respect. But here's the shift their discomfort is not your responsibility. A boundary isn't about controlling somebody else's reaction, it's about owning your decision without backing down, even when it gets uncomfortable. So here's how to hold your boundaries without caving, like I used to. Expect resistance. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries will not love your new ones, and that is a-okay. Imagine that you've been handing out free coffee at work every morning, and then one day you suddenly stop, and people are annoyed and confused. They're like, well, where's my free coffee? But here's the thing, it was never theirs to begin with. Same goes for your time, your energy, your emotional labor. People don't have to like your boundaries, but they do have to respect them. So if you're waiting for everyone to be happy about them, newsflash, you're going to be waiting a long time. Hold the line anyway. Stay strong with yourself. All right, here's where it gets juicy. Acknowledge, but don't absorb. And this is where a lot of people get stuck. This is where I used to. You can acknowledge someone's feelings without making those feelings your responsibility. I had a client, Sarah, lovely woman. She struggled with this big time. Every time she set a boundary, she'd get hit up with the classic guilt trip. Friends saying, oh, wow, I didn't expect you to be like this, or I thought we were close, that time old classic. And boom, just like that, she'd cave. Until we worked on one simple shift. Acknowledge, but don't absorb. And now when somebody guilt trips her, she simply replies with, I hear this is frustrating for you. I know this isn't what you wanted. And I know this is different to what you're used to. And then she stops talking. No explaining, no over apologizing, no justifying, because the second you start explaining, you are opening the door for negotiation, and that's not what you want. So the next thing to remember is to stop over explaining yourself, because when you do over explain, you're giving people this opening to push back. So instead of justifying your boundary, stick to this, be direct. This is what I need. Be firm. I understand, but I'm sticking with my decision. And be consistent. This is a big one. I've already explained this is where I stand, and that hasn't changed. And the less you explain, the less room you leave for debate. Now, be careful of the manipulation trap. And let's talk about the biggest mistake that a lot of people make. I know I did. Thinking that if somebody reacts badly, then you've done something wrong. Manipulation works by making you feel like you're the bad guy. And we know that's not true. So if somebody guilt trips you or blames you or acts all hurt simply because you set a boundary, that's not a sign that you should cave in and stop and say, oh, well, okay, I've changed my mind. That's a sign that they don't respect your limits. And that's a them problem. That's their issue to deal with, not yours. You don't need to manage the fallout or any of that. And I want to leave you with a final thought, because if holding a boundary makes you feel guilty, remind yourself of this. Self-respect is not selfish. You don't owe anyone an explanation for prioritizing your mental health or your energy or saying no to things that drain you. You are not responsible for managing other people's reactions to your boundaries, but you are responsible for holding them. Now, if this video hit home, make sure you like and subscribe, because there's so much more to come. And remember that your boundaries are valid. Keep them, hold on to them, and stop apologizing for them. See you in the next video.